Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really into the Krays, join our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London, where you can find stuff possibly unavailable anywhere else. We're an established group and very friendly. The link is in the YouTube description section.
Me and my brother, we're going to rule London.
He knows too much about things. Things about us. Reggie knows too many things about us.
He knows too many things about us. Right, Albie, you know things about us, mate. You know things, eh? About Ron, about me, about the firm, right? You know about payments, right? Do you know we cash bearer bonds, yeah? Do you know we pay off juries to make them look fucking favourably upon us, do ya?
Yes.
You do, there's a fucking surprise. Jack, mate, do you know anything about fraud? Anything at all, take a punt. Do you know anything about how we pay off policemen every fucking final Thursday of the month? Do you know that?
Of course I do.
Fucking surprise, that. So why don't we kill Jack now? Or we do Albie as well, we'll do the fucking lot. Or you can do me and I'll do you, we're both fucking dead. That's a genius idea. Listen to yourself, Ron. You're fucking nuts!
Each area of London had its own organised crime group, if you like. It was neighbourhood based. They made their money from thieving, from stealing, and also from various kinds of extortion. The big area to plunder immediately after the war was the West End of London. And the main players there, you had Jack Spot Comer and you had Billy Hill. Both men of violence, and they clashed. It was a clash over territory, it was a clash over personalities. And as far as the relationship with the Krays were concerned, the Krays were really seen as likely lads who were coming through. These were highly marketable young men who proved themselves as local men of violence in the East End of London and were being spotted by these elder statesmen of crime as being possible cohorts.
They were in fact spot men, really. Originally, the story is that they were hired by Spot to defend him at the spring meeting at Epsom in, I think 1955.
I can remember Ronnie saying, we're going to the races. I said, what do you know about the races, Ron? He said, well, not a lot. He said, well, we could soon learn, and we're going with Jack Spot. And he loved the idea.
He was a funny man. He used to sort of hold court in the Cumberland Hotel at Marble Arch, sort of very much like sort of one of the old-time mafiosi with a sort of fedora hat on and a smart suit and having his boots polished. The Spot was on the decline. The men he'd had defected to Hill, where the pickings were an awful lot better, and he eventually quarrels with a man called Albert Dimes, who was the Hill number 2, and they had a celebrated fight in Frith Street where they cut each other to ribbons.
I've gone round one day and there's Jack Spot, you know, this man who Ronnie was in awe of, sitting in their kitchen with, Lord knows, cuts on his face like nothing, you know. Oh, he looked up at me and he was sitting down and he said, I'll be back, son, I'll be back. And I thought, you won't be coming back anywhere. You're finished, mate. You know, your days of being number one gangster are over.
Spot fell right out of the picture. What there was left of him.
While Reggie might say that Billy Hill was his role model because he was smarter, he was, in his opinion, cleverer than Spot, and he was also, in Reggie's opinion, more like Reggie than Ronnie.
Billy Hill was the great example to them because Billy Hill was one of the few people actually, having spent 17 years in the Nick, he did finally make a bit of money out of crime.
Billy Hill was a user. Simple and straightforward as that.
They was being used to use violence on other people for a pittance. And they wasn't satisfied with having a pittance. They said, well, we'll have the lot.
There was a big meeting held in Clerkenwell where it was decided what certain people would get, what Jack Spot was getting previous. After that particular meeting, the twins was the governor of everything.
Ron was pathetic. You know, he had a massive breakdown. He was certified, and Reg always had to look after him, you see.
What happened, Ron got 3 years at the Old Bailey, and he went to Winchester prison, and whilst there, he had some trouble, got certified, and so he went to Long Grove, which is a mental hospital. And he decided that he wanted to have it away from there. He told me on a visit.
When Ronnie was incarcerated in a mental hospital, there was a switch between Reggie and Ronnie. Ronnie walks out when Reggie's come to do the visiting, and no one seems to notice that Ronnie isn't Reggie, and vice versa for some time.
And the police were called. I never saw any police because I was called before I was called enough to see the doctor. And he said, well, you're very fortunate. I can't do anything about this. He said, but you brought trouble on your own head, which I suppose I did in the long run because it didn't work out. We called for Ron wasn't on any medication, so he eventually had to go back to Long Grove. But he had all the papers at the time, so he enhanced their reputation a bit.
Why Reggie done what he done to get him out of there was crazy to begin with. Because Ronnie needed medical attention. He's always needed medical attention.
Reg started the Double R Club. The Double R means Ron and Reg in Walthamstow. And Reg became, even then, very keen on celebrities.
Well, it was a big house, that's all the Double R was. I mean, it wasn't like a club at all, it was just 2 big rooms. And yet Reggie always loved that because it was the very first club that they'd actually owned.
Esmeralda's was in Knightsbridge, and I think this was one of the things that led to their downfall, because they really, well, they were off their manor.
It was a big mistake because instead of leaving it alone and keeping away from there and just popping their head in now and again, they took the East End to Knightsbridge.
You had second cousins to the Queen and all that going in there, all high people, all with something wrong with them. I'm sorry, you know, every one of them had something wrong with them. They liked boys, or if it was a woman, she'd be a lesbian or something like that, you know, all cranky, all a lot of them. But Ronnie, you couldn't sit him amongst them type of people. You know, he would stick out like a sore thumb.
And I suppose the Knightsbridge set, they found it amusing to start with, seeing all these scar faces and pug uglies roaming around. But they're sitting down with a East End cab driver and a lord and lady, somebody sitting the other side, you know. And then of course, when a few checks were made out and they're a bit late being honoured, the twins wouldn't 2 or 3 weeks go by and they would be around putting pickaxes through Rolls Royces and things like that, you know.
The next club they had was the Kentucky, which they had a big splash there, a lot of celebrities there. They knew one thing about them, they did know a lot of good top celebrities, you know what I mean? Judy Garland, as you know, all them sort of people.
It was always packed 7 days a week, but again, the twins never earned no money out of clubs. Because the simple reason is everyone would come in, they was buying drinks for.
They put their money about. They had no sense with money. Money was worthless to them. They just spent it as fast as they got it and give it away. If you said to him, I like your watch, he'd take it off and give it to you. He was so generous in that way.
For Ronnie, it was never really about money. For Reggie, it was really about money. Reggie wanted to be an adept businessman. Ronnie would never allow it. Ronnie would go to where they were working, and he would take whatever he wanted, whatever it was, right? If they had £200 in the till, he'd give me £150.
They had loads of clubs in the finish, like pissholes. Not like clubs at all, you know? Unauthorised spills where the gambling went on.
They had what Albert used to call the milk round. He used to go and collect the money from all these places. And of course, then they got in, when the Americans come over, the Americans expected to pay a little bit of, I don't know what you call protection money, but it was just, sort of favour money to keep all their nuisances out. If they had any problems and knockers and upsetting their clubs, they could call on the twins.
One big payment was a quarterly payment from the colony in Mayfair, paid by the mafia, and they was paying, I think, $3,500 a quarter to keep us out. They thought we were too thuggish. Mafioso talking like that.
It suddenly clicked in my mind. Ronnie thinks he's George Raft. And Ronnie, I think, was in love with him. But everything he did, his way of dressing, his gestures, his way of speaking, everything was George Raft, and that's what he thought he was.
And there they all were in this background of 60s culture booming around the West End and the Chelsea set and this whole area. And they were this weird pair. And the weirdest of the two was Ron, and he became weirder and weirder and more popular, more and more talked about. Well, popular, he was talked about, he was feared, he was an unbelievable character.
If a famous personality was coming from abroad or anything like that, they would take it on their back to meet them and be seen with them, to be photographed with them. And that in itself makes them a personality in their own right.
How did you feel when you met people like Joe Louis?
I enjoyed meeting them a lot because they were my boyhood heroes, and when I met them I was very pleased to meet them. And when the press has made a big thing in this since then, I can't understand their reasoning, because I'm sure everyone would like to meet Joe Louis. Whether it be President World Champion today or tomorrow, whenever, past, present or future.
If they was out on an evening time, they'd want to have their photo done with a star or something like that, to keep them up the front, like, that's all it was.
They'd always wanted to be somebody's. I mean, I always remember old Ron, his great remark was, better a somebody than a nobody.
It was like a family home, and it was just a small little terraced house, and the twins and the mum and dad slept upstairs. There was a front room and a little kitchen, it was a tiny little place.
It was the cleanest, most polished house I've ever seen, and decorated in the style of a canal longboat, with pictures of Rochester Castle and roses and, the traditional type of decoration. Lots of polished brass. Each interior door had a white lace curtain over it, tied back with pink bows. It was something unique.
There was a superabundance of kitsch. I've never seen so much, including this wonderful mirror shaped like a guitar hanging from one wall over the sideboard.
Fort Valence, that was the nickname. And sometimes you deserved it because they had everything in there, guns, knives, you name it,
I went to Fort Valence on one occasion. After we'd had a victory in the magistrates' court, I went back with my instructing solicitor's managing clerk, who was a wonderful old character called Paddy Pakenham, who knew all the East End villains, and we had tea, and Violet gave us tea. And so I saw Fort Valence. It was an extraordinary experience, because there was a conference going on in each room, over different matters, and Violet presiding at the bottom in her curlers. And she brought tea and entrees up to each conference room.
Well, she was a lovely woman. She's a typical mum, East End mum. I used to take my kids around there, and she would get them by the hand and take them in the kitchen, give them something to eat and make my sandwich, and she was a typical East End mother, and very kind and affectionate, and I mean she loved the twins like any mother. They can't see no harm in them, and obviously she must have worried about them and what they were doing, but I mean they never spoke in front of her. It was always in another room. Nothing was ever said in front of Violet.
At the end, she must have sort of known what they was, what they was up to and that, because the house was that small, you couldn't really talk in there and she couldn't hear.
People used to come out of prison, say, and knock on the door at Valence Road. No one was ever turned away. No one. They always give them £20, which was a lot of money them days.
I've never seen anything like it, before or since. And it was Violet's pride and joy in her kingdom.
There was no question. Ronnie Kray didn't want to do anything other than be a gangster. He knew there was money in being a gangster, but the power was more important to him.
He wanted to be Legs Diamond, Al Capone. He wanted to be the Colonel. He wanted to be feared by people. He loved being feared by people.
That was the kind of man that he was. When he was called the Colonel, he was the Colonel. Yeah, he had a little army of about 10 people. He could call on other people, but nothing to do with the firm.
They were fantasists too, so they loved gangster movies. They loved the idea of being gangsters. It was very interesting once. I remember asking Ron, what books have you ever read that really influenced you? Got a very funny answer. He said, 2 books, he said. One was Boys Town, because it's all about boys and I like boys. I said, what's the other one? He said, it's Anthony Nutting's book on General Gordon. He said, I love General Gordon, he's my hero. So I said, why? He said, because he was gay like me, and he faced overwhelming odds and died like a man.
Ronnie wanted Reggie to be like him. He wanted him to think like him, and Reggie wasn't that type of person. He wasn't. Reggie could have an argument with you, like everybody else, and he could hit you on the chin, walk away and forget completely about the argument. Ronnie couldn't do that. Ronnie would, mentally, he would want to really hurt you, and hurt you bad.
Ron was terrifying. He wanted to be. He really could look so evil. I mean, just hear Ron say, "You cunt," was in a way no one has ever said it in my life before.
You wouldn't insult Ronnie. You wouldn't say one word about Ronnie. Because if he heard of it, he would come looking for you, yeah.
He'd have a couple of midgets to come along, because he had a touch of circus, the thing about old East End circus stuff, you see. And these midgets would come and say, hello, they'd say, we're friends of Reggie and Ronnie. If you don't tell the truth about us, we'll kill you. Bang, bang, you see. And the pub would roar with laughter at this.
Ronnie Kray was insane at certain times in his life. He suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, which isn't controlled by medication, is very dangerous.
He was partially sedated by an old East End doctor who I used to know, called Dr. Blasker, who used to prescribe pills to him, and they weren't the right pills, and Ron would come out of this state, but he wasn't properly sedated.
Blasker looked after him ever since he was about 17 onwards with pills, yeah, every single day. Well, he quietened him down, there's no two ways about that. I mean, from a raging lunatic, he would be sitting there like a zombie.
He wasn't the same person one day as he was the day before, And the influence he had over Reg, in my opinion, was great, you know. And not only Reg, 90% of the other people in the East End that he worked with, you know.
Not so much Reggie, he wasn't too bad in that respect. It was Ronnie. Ronnie was looking for to kill.
Reggie was more businesslike, a bit more sensible, violent. Don't worry about that. He was a violent, vicious man, but it was more directed. There was more reason behind his violence. Where Ronnie done it for fun.
Went to Esmeralda's barn in Knightsbridge. When I walked into a kitchen. And Ronnie was standing opposite me as I walked in. And when he turned, that's when I see these, I called them pokers, but they were cold steels, what they sharpened knives on. You know, he had them on the gas. And I thought to myself, hey, he's trying to fight me, like, you know what I mean? Anyway, he come over with a poker, and he started burning my hair off. You know, I had thick curly hair then. And he come up to me and he just went, like that. And then he put it across there. And then he took that poker back and he went back, got another one off, and he held it across my eyes there. And I shut my eyes then. So he said, open your fucking eyes, he said to me. I thought, so blimey. He said, now I'm going to burn your fucking eyes out. Now all this is melted now. And someone at the back, they just shouted out, no, Ron, not that. And he just, like that, switched off. He walked away. He said, right, you can go now. As if nothing had happened.
You had to be on your guard with Ronnie, like 99% of the time, you know? Because, as you say, he was never the same, you know, one day to the next.
Ronnie gave me a gun in a club in the West End and wanted Connie to be shot. He said, don't shoot him to kill him, shoot him in the legs. Connie was in the toilet then. And I went in there and I said, Ronnie wants you shot. There's the gun. Got out of the toilet quick and that was it. I went back and I says, he's gone out. But there was many a time that Ronnie and Reggie spoke about knocking Connie off.
A week later, he'd change his mind, and Connie would be back on the firm. That is how the Colonel, Ronnie Kray, carried on. Just lunatic.
Ronnie was getting too violent, and all Ronnie wanted to do is hurt everybody. You know, couldn't be happy to get up and have a night out or a day out without someone's got to get hurt somewhere through some ludicrous thing, you know?
I walked up to the bar and stood there, said hello to a few people who I recognised, bought a drink, and I noticed people drifting away from me, left and right. And I knew something was going on. I turned around and Reggie's trying to cop an automatic pistol, if you don't mind. The next thing I know, bang, I'm shot in the leg.
Times and time again when we went to clubs, if Ronnie seen a stranger and coming into his domain, he didn't like it. He would make a point of going over and sticking one right on him. And it didn't stop there. It was a kicking. We all stood by. We wouldn't grab Ronnie because Ronnie would do you. And Ronnie was a nutter.
I'd met a man named David Litvinoff who had upset them. He was a good informant of ours, but we didn't run his name in the paper. He told us a lot of what had gone on. Litvinoff had his mouth widened with a sword. I understand that Ronnie had held it in two hands and done that to his mouth while somebody else was holding him still, and widened his mouth. And it was a gesture that he'd made to him for something that David Litvinoff had said, and it was a case of, well, if you're going to use your mouth like that as a big mouth, I'll show you what a big mouth looks like, and cut his face nearly ear to ear. The extraordinary thing is that David Litvinov was in hospital. 2 days later, Ronnie came and visited him, brought him flowers, and said, "I hope you're all right, I hope you'll recover soon." That was the man.
Ronnie was in this club and the guy came up to him and said, "Hello, Ron, how are you doing? You're putting a bit of weight on, aren't you?" And Ronnie's made some remark, then went out of the club, got in his car and was driven off, and he said, "Hang on, turn round." And they turned round and went back. It just shows how cold and calculated and anticipatory he was about what he was going to do, because he went back into the club and he said, "Come here, you." Took him in the toilet and striped him down both cheeks. And they called this guy Tramlines. That was his name after that.
Some people nearly died. You know, we would have to wrap them up in something to sort of stem the blood and then drop them outside the London hospital, wasn't it? And that was regular thing.
Little Mickey Morris, they beat the life out of him, like the two of them, you know, for no reason whatsoever.
A young fighter, young ex-fighter, one of Ronnie's ex-boyfriends, again upset him for some reason, and he just took a Gurkha knife and just started hacking into him. Practically killed the kid. Face, head, hand, back, wherever it was possible to hit him. I think he wrapped him in a bed quilt of some sort. And again dumped him outside the hospital. Could have died from loss of blood if he hadn't been picked up straight away.
And they were always fighting. Ronnie and Reggie was always fighting. If the crowd was round the pub like that and Ronnie and Reggie was there, if an argument was starting between Ronnie and Reggie, the crowd would gradually move right out of the way. They didn't want to get involved. If they got involved, the two of them would turn on them. That's how they were.
They might be raring about something on the morning, and they'd come in the snooker room. Then all of a sudden, one or the other would start lashing out at the other one. They'd be fighting, yeah.
When they were round, they were like two girls round, you know, like your sisters over boyfriends or makeup or something, or their brooms. They just stood to scream and shout at each other.
One day Ronnie was having a go about Reggie's wife, and Nobby Clark, fool as he is, joined in. So now nothing was done straight away. They didn't work like that. It would register, and they would save it up, use it when it was time.
Between 12 and 2 in the morning, Reggie was stinking drunk, and Ronnie kept going at him and saying, "Why don't you go over and get that little bastard? Go on, get a gun and go and shoot him." So we went over there. Nobby's coming down the stairs. I said, "What are you doing this time of night? What do you want? What do you want? Can't you see me in the morning?" He never dreamt what was going to happen next. Reggie put the gun up to shoot his head off. I got a hold of Nobby and I punched him, and he fell down. Reggie shot him, but it ended up going in his foot or his leg.
I think Frances had a raw deal. She'd have been better off not to even got with Reggie in the beginning, because you can't take a person from normal environment and put her into an environment like that. Before they even got engaged or anything, I was on a boat with him going to France, and he'd bought her a lovely necklace, and they had a row, and invariably their rows was only over the family and the way that they treated Frances, and she had a good reason to. You know, they didn't treat her nice at all. And what happened was she ripped the necklace off and threw it overboard. Frances wanted a different life, and she didn't want to be out all night long in clubs and things like that. You know, she didn't want that.
Lewis Chester, a colleague of mine, and I went to the wedding of Reggie Kray and Francis Shea. Reggie entered with his bride, and a hymn was struck up by the organist, which the congregation didn't know. I could see Ronnie Kray, who was best man, becoming very fidgety in his pew, and he kept turning round with an irascible look in his face. The organist played on, and Ronnie finally got up and strode down the aisle, and he said in the loudest stage whisper, "Sing, fuck you, sing."
They wasn't left alone to be husband and wife. He couldn't stay another night like an ordinary person could. There'd be a phone call and he'd have to go to this pub or that club, and or Ronnie would want him, and it was like really having if you're married into a big family, having a family interfering in your marriage, and that's what it was like with him and Ron,
Hostility, it was there, the continuous, because Ronnie used to really go to town with her,
Reggie told me he didn't know how to touch a woman, to excite her. Didn't want to hurt her. So he said, didn't want to hurt her, didn't know how to touch her.
Frances' mother revealed that her daughter's marriage to Reggie Kray had never been consummated. The marriage quickly fell apart.
When she broke up from him, I had to drive Reggie around to that house 4 or 5 times a week, and used to throw little stones up at the window. She wouldn't come in the window a few times, but then once or twice she would come, and we'd just go away and leave me alone. She just didn't want to know.
Massive show funeral, buried her in a wedding dress, open coffin. My main job on that day was to make a note of everybody who we knew who hadn't sent flowers, which I thought was pretty sick myself.
When Francis died, Reggie lived in our house for about 9 months, and we tried to help him through his, his bereavement, I think he was so much in love with her, it just, it really broke his heart, when she died.
Reggie thought so much of Francis, his life ended. That's the way he looked at it. Told me so out of his own mouth.
For some time, the Krays had been competing with a rival firm from South London, the Richardsons. An all-out gang war was imminent.
Ronnie always wanted to shoot somebody who was in the firm from across the water. He hated the Richardsons, absolutely hated them. He always thought that the Richardsons would come along with the guns and there'd be a right shootout.
We'd all been paired off, given a name, an address, where they drank, girlfriend's house, wife's house, all that information. And we were just waiting for the off.
The call to arms never came. The Richardson gang were involved in a shootout at Mr. Smith's club in South London.
There was a desperate fight in March 1955 between Eddie Richardson and Frankie Fraser, who were business partners on the one hand, and some people called the Haywoods and their friends on the other. More or less everybody who'd been in the club was charged with a fray, and that took out really most of the Richardson, if I can say, team.
George Cornell was one member of the Richardson gang not present at the shooting.
When the Richardsons went down, that's when they went after Georgie, But I don't think they'd have done it if the Richardsons wasn't in prison, because he was on his own now. All the others are away.
He was on the pavement, fire, George. He could have a rat, George. Yeah, couldn't he, Tony? He could, yeah. And he had no fear. He was the only man, I swear to God, that I ever see. He came into the Grave Morris pub, one day, and Ronnie's with his little boys, you understand? And he came in on his own. The firm are there, if you like, all the crap, and
they went to get him a drink, and he went, no, he said, I don't drink with you and your little puffs. And had his drink and walked out. And it wasn't long after that the old nail was gone in the coffin, you know what I mean? And it was he was on top for him, you know what I mean?
What happened was the next night, after the fight, Cornell goes to visit a man in hospital in North London, and whether out of bravado, whether out of just recklessness, or whether he never thought anything was going to happen at all, goes into the Blind Beggar.
Ronnie Kray went to the pub with Ian Barry and Scott's Jack Dixon and shot Cornell dead.
He says, drive me up to the Blind Beggars. So as we're going up there, he sticks a gun in Ian's hand and says, here, put that in your pocket. And he tells me where to pull up. He goes in, he couldn't have been in there any more than about 3-4 minutes. The guns went off. Ian didn't know what to do. He took the gun out and shot the ceiling. I could never understand why he went down for murder. Ronnie gets into the car, so he'll laughing his head off. I've done it. I've actually shot him. I've shot that bastard Cornell.
I've just done the bars to these things. Drinking in our manner. Took it like as a bit of an insult. He was quite convinced that he'd done the right thing and sorted him out.
But I know Charlie Richardson in his book said that Ron needed his sacrificial victim. And I think, you know, Charlie Richardson, he was a smart guy. He got it right. I think he was his sacrificial victim.
To get shot for calling someone a fat puff, that just shows you the state of Ronnie's mind in the end.
We had a nurse in a London hospital, giving us hourly updates. And she told us that he'd been transferred to another hospital, a neurological unit. Then I think it was about 3:30 in the morning, we got the message he's died. After all, a little cheer went up from the crowd. And that was it. That was the end of Cornell.
After Ron had killed Cornell, what does he do? He goes into his flat, holes up, hiding from where he thinks is after him. In fact, they weren't after him. Playing records of Winston Churchill's wartime speeches. Well, that's no normal murderer. That's very weird. And they were weird.
Everybody and his friend knew Ronnie Kray shot Cornell. He didn't hide it. The authorities knew. They couldn't find anybody to pin it on because lack of witnesses.
Cornell, there's no point in shooting the poor bugger. No point at all. You know, the supposed war with the Richardsons was over because the Richardsons were all in the nick by then, so there's no point in going and shooting him in the Blind Beggar. But it was necessary for the cult.
By December 1966, the Krays felt invincible. To enhance their growing reputation, they hatched an audacious plan to spring one of England's most dangerous criminals from Dartmoor prison, Frank Mitchell, the Mad Axeman.
He had been in the system since he was about 12, and he'd never been out of it. His first conviction was for stealing a fairy cycle. And the dreadful thing was that from that moment, his life had a ghastly inevitability in it. He went to industrial school, it was called in those days, but what now would be a secure accommodation. And then he went to Borstal, and he went through the system. He never got out, but every time he entered a new institution, he got into more trouble within the institution.
He'd been flogged and birched and incarcerated for most of his adult life, the most recalcitrant of all prison offenders, and then had suddenly turned completely into a cooperative and yielding kind of a prisoner, so that he was able to go on to a working party.
For a con, he had a pretty good life on Dartmoor. Come and go as he pleased. They'd give him a sort of free rein.
They were taking girls down there so that Frank Mitchell could enjoy them. And they were taking money down there so that he could go off. And when he was supposed to be working on fences or under the supervision of a prison officer, he was off to Tavistock to buy another budgie.
Most people, they say, oh, I'll be out in 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever. They know their release date. But Mitchell didn't. He was complaining about this, and Ronnie said, don't worry, we'll get you out. Come and work with us.
Mitchell was to be brought out of prison to join the gang in order to give weight to their firm when they joined in their battle with the Richardsons. In March, the Richardsons had this fracas in the Mr. Smith's club, and they were all wiped up, and so the need to bring Mitchell out was gone.
On December 12th, 1966, the twins sent Albert Donoghue and Teddy Smith to the West Country to pick up Mitchell off the moor.
Day we picked Mitchell up, we came up from London, came off the Exeter Road, over the hill here, parked up here, as was already planned. But in actual fact, we didn't think it was going to happen. But Teddy Smith went in the phone box to the reason for being here. Took about 20 minutes, and then Big Frank strolled round the bend here, as though he owned the place. In the car, got him changed, took a big, bloody great Tarzan-type knife off him. Then we packed all his prison gear up and chucked it over a hedge, where it was found a couple of days later. And we were home in London before it was on the radio.
The authorities launched a massive search. The Krays arranged for Mitchell to hide out in a flat tended by Scott Jack Dixon.
He was already in the flat when I went in. I put my hand out as if he was a long-lost friend, because we'd already heard so much about Frank. He was a giant of a fella, a bit simple in his ways. I dare say that you couldn't pick a fight with a man like him.
I don't know why the twins thought they could control him, but all the authorities, psychiatrists, mental institutions, Rampton, Broadmoor, they'd all failed. But they, for some reason, thought they could control him. But they couldn't. Med Teddy Smith, who was the driver on the Dartmoor pickup, fancied himself as a bit of an author, and he would go there every day and write these letters to various newspapers, politicians, and that sort of thing.
All we wanted was a few letters to go to the newspapers and say, I'm quite prepared to come back if I get a release date. When we got the first letter printed in the newspaper, so I bought papers and fetched them back in. And I said, look, you're in the news again. Oh, great. Oh, they'll soon give me a date. No, I said, poor soul never got a date. The days went by and he was getting restless, very, very restless. Anyway, I went and seen Reggie. I said, Reggie, somebody's got to come over and see him. He's doing his nut and he wants to see one of the twins.
He just said, would you like a young girl, Frank? You know, like calm him down. And he said, oh yeah.
She was an hostess, and like many hostesses, unfortunately, are like prostitutes. So she was there to give him a service, and which she agreed, and she got paid for it.
Once he got the girl, most of the time he stayed in bed having sex. He used to get the meals in bed, both of them. And Frank fell in love with her, and in a way she liked Frank.
They say she was kidnapped. She could have left that flat. It was only an ordinary council flat. She could have left there any time she wished to. I mean, he had to sleep. And while he was asleep, she could have got up and walked out the door.
We wouldn't allow her to use the phone. She was a prisoner. Not that she knew about being a prisoner, but she was a prisoner because Frank didn't want her to go.
Then he started getting a bit edgy, and he said if the twins didn't come and see him, he'd go and see them. He knew where they lived because he'd been writing to him when he was away, and they took this as a threat. And this plot was hatched. Get rid of him.
They had their reputation to live up to, and if they offered him up to the police and got him arrested, sent back to prison, how would that look and how would that stand? So Ronnie being Ronnie, he wanted him to disappear off the face of the earth. I could perform these sort of tasks without any problems, and I said, but this is the last one from when I said, I'm not getting involved in any more after this, this is it. I said, do this one favour for me, And it was Christmas, building up to Christmas week, and I've got a business to run, I've got kids to the booze to look after, and all the things that were going on at the time, bits of aggro indoors. I mean, you get all this, and this is on top of it all, It's the last thing I wanted, I needed to do, or be asked to do. I was very reluctant, really, but to give me word, I said I'd do it, I'd take care of it.
There was a plot between Charlie, Reggie, three foremen. I was present in the house, but not in the room. There was another guy who owned the house. And then they came out. Charlie came to me. He said, I want you to meet Freddie, Canning Town Bridge. Make arrangements to get Mitchell out of the flat, because he trusted me, and I got him off the moor. So I was used to get him out of the flat and separate him from the girl. Telling me he's going to the country to have Christmas with Ronnie. But Ronnie don't want any women running around the place. He went for that. Led him out of the flat, into the van.
He left the flat with Frank Mitchell and walked round the corner, and he was to just put him in the back of the van and go back to the flat. Why? For whatever reason, he climbed up in the front, I don't know, because he wasn't supposed to do that.
On the left-hand side is Freddie Foreman and Elfie Gerrard. Callahan gets in the passenger seat. Once the door slammed, they started firing. Then Mitchell's still moving and groaning on the floor. So Gerrard said, I'm empty, give him another one, Fred. Now he leaned forward and done him behind the ear.
The situation in the van got out of hand, and it had to be done there and then. It wasn't the plan. The plan was to get well down the road. But things don't always work out as you expect.
We all heard the shots, and we commented on it. Well, Lisa was the first. She screamed, they've shot. She wasn't a fool, the girl.
I got out of the van all right, walked away. Still wasn't quite sure whether I'd get one in the back of the nut or not.
5 minutes, maybe less than that, Albert come back and says, he's gone now, get your gear, Lisa, I'm taking you to Reggie. But Albert assured her, nothing will happen to you.
I briefed her, I said, when you go and talk to Reggie, don't mention bangs, otherwise you'll go swimming. I said, you just go there and say, where do you think Frank's gone? Say he's gone to the country to be with Ronnie. That's what he told me. And leave it at that. If you start talking about bangs, it's all over. Anyway, she passed that little interview. And she survived.
He cried. Yeah. So that's how much Reggie knew about him. He broke down and sat on the stairs and cried.
11 days after Mitchell's escape from Dartmoor, Foreman, with the help of a trawlerman, disposed of the body at sea. Ronnie's thirst for murder was out of control. Reggie found it increasingly difficult to resist Ron's violent demands. In October 1967, matters came to a head. A local villain, Jack the Hat McVitie, had upset the twins and was unfortunate enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I didn't like the fellow McVitie. I wanted to get rid of it. Oh, he did everything wrong. He's very uncouth. Very uncouth. He's loud and aggressive, which I find is a vexation to the spirit. And he was just saying there was something I despised.
Whenever I see the film Mean Streets with De Niro playing the part of the guy with the hat who causes all this mayhem, that's Jack the Hat, that character. When I look at it, you know, completely untrustworthy.
He didn't care tuppence about them, Jack. He wasn't frightened of them. And this is where he was an embarrassment to them. The Krays tried to put him down, like, oh, he's nothing, like he's a drunk and a tuppeny halfpenny thief, and he was a bloody good thief.
I like Jack as a character. And he won the grass.
He could be very violent. But he was more of a sort of a joker than a serious person, you know?
Jack was a nuisance, there's no doubt about it. He was a pest, and I mean, everywhere he went, there was a trail of destruction behind him, and he was on those Dexedrine tablets, you know, those little pills that was about in those days, and just another form of speed. And he was speeding every day, morning, noon, and night, you know. I remember going round to his house once, for some reason, I don't know why. And I sat there to have a cup of tea, opposite the fireplace. And I looked up over the top of the fireplace, and there's all these bullet holes in the fire, you know, in the chimney breast. And I said to his wife, I said, what's all that? What's that there? He said, oh, that's when he gets drunk, he lets go at the chimney, you know, with a shooter. So I thought,
He was in the Carpenter's Arms, the pub bed then, at the time of the East End. And there was no sign of any agitation, no problem. There was Ronnie, Reggie, it was all there. Even their parents were there. So there was no thing, and we left with two other men, me and my brother. And by chance, we happened to go to Regency.
Who should turn up? Jack the Hat. Let's have a drink and all the rest of it. No, we're all right, Jack. And so there's loads of people.
I get a phone call from my doorman saying Reggie's in the foyer, could I go and see him? He's got Ronnie Hart and Ronnie Bender with him. So he said, Jack's downstairs. He said, I'm going to kill him.
Well, the next thing I'm called upstairs in the office by Tony Barry, and there was Reggie and Ronnie Hart. He just says, who wants to see Jack? Is he down? I went, yeah. I'll bring him to a party. But at no time did I know it was going to happen.
Tony Lumbyard's gone back to look after Jack the Hat. Reggie's pulled a gun out in the office and said, look after that. He's give me the gun. As he did that, Ronnie Hart's pulled out a great big dagger, like a great big kitchen knife. He said, yeah, hold that as well. So I put them in the office drawer. About 15 minutes later, Hart's come back. She asked me for the knife then. I gave him the knife. Said, Reggie wants you to take the gun round to Blonde Carol's. So I said, well, if you don't take it round there, Reggie's going to come back and he's going to shoot Jack in your club. Well, we knocked on Blonde Carol's door. Go down to the basement. I handed Reggie the gun. I've gone back to the club. Jack goes round to the party. And that was the last we saw of Jack.
I would never put myself in that position again. It was wrong what happened to Jack the Hat. I'm going to say that. It wasn't very nice. He didn't deserve that. You know, If they had that argument with him, don't involve no one else.
We go along to Bloncarrel's, thinking there's going to be this party, going to have a bit of a time there and get on to the West End. We go down the steps, go into the room, Jack runs in, where's the party?
I see Ronnie standing there, and these two fellas dancing. And all Ronnie did was bars past me, hit him with a little glass. Along there, he went, now, fuck off you, cunt, I've had enough of you.
A bit of an argument starts between Reggie and Jack. Reggie pulls a gun out. I think he's going to frighten him. You understand? Goes click, nothing works.
That was the first time I seen the gun. That was the time I seen nothing. And it didn't seem to me that they knew what they were doing.
I can't handle it. I walk out of the room and Connie White comes to me. I'm really upset. I'm torn between frustration, anger.
Well, they said that Ronnie was urging on doing convict, it was not Ronnie Kray. I had no need to protect Ronnie Kray from anything. It was Ronnie I allowed him. And he had him right behind, he had his arms pinned back. And was he ready to do it.
I can't go to Jack's rescue. If you want to know what I really felt, I felt a coward. It's hard.
I never seen a knife. I don't know where the knife come from. It was over before it happened.
And Ronnie came out and said, what's the matter with him? And Connie said, well, he's upset about all this. Ronnie said, take him home.
It didn't seem real. It didn't seem real. And next thing is, people are going everywhere. What happened between him leaving that pub and meeting him at the Regency? So it happened in that short period of time, within an hour.
I had a bit of an argument with him wrong, didn't I? I can't feel him wrong that night. And it spurred me on, you know.
The guy was at the edge of a nervous breakdown. His wife had just killed herself. He was drunk, he was drugged, he was dominated by his homicidal old twin. These were all the things that it was about.
McVitie was stabbed to death. The Lambriano brothers, along with Ronnie Bender, were left to clean up any trace of the murder. On the morning of May 9th, 1968, the Kray twins and other members of the firm were arrested by Nipper Reed and his team and charged with the murders of George Cornell, Frank Mitchell, and Jack the Hat McVitie. The trial of the Old Bailey was presided over by Justice Melford Stevenson and became one of the longest and most expensive criminal trials in English legal history. Ronnie Kray, 30 years. Ian Barry, 20 years. Ronnie Bender, 20 years. Reggie Kray, 30 years. Charles Kray, 10 years. Tony Barry, acquitted being under duress. Chris Lambriano, 15 years. Freddie Foreman, 10 years. Tony Lambriano, 15 years. Connie Whitehead, 7 years.
I wasn't surprised at the sentences in any way. A gang of people that had ruled the East End of London by a regime of terror and fear, had killed people coldly, analytically, motivelessly, in full view of other people, simply because they wanted to exercise their authority as gang leaders.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly, moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.